Right, this is what we have from the previous session. In this session, we are going to move to creating new users into our actual database, not just this raw data. So the endpoint that we'll be using mostly will be this one, the post endpoint, because it's the post that is used to create something to the database. Since this is the first time we are going to have users in our database, we don't need to be focusing on getting them, or we are going to go to be updating anything because we don't have anyone there. So the very first thing is to be able to be creating new users, which is our focus for today. So yeah, this is where we are. So what I will do is that I will cut this, put it at the top here. Let it be the first thing here. So I'm pushing the rest down. Let me place it here. So this is what we'll be focusing on mostly. Okay, now the function that we have, as we have functions in data in Python, right? First, Python usually receive arguments or parameters into the bracket here. So the bracket here is responsible for receiving every input that the function will need in order to perform its role. What we did previously, we were not receiving anything. That's why the bracket was empty. But then whenever the front end is sending a particular data, the endpoint should receive it and pass it to the function, so that the function will use it to do everything that we need. Okay, so first we should be able to give this thing some parameters or some arguments down. So in this format, the most format that we'll be using is JSON format, but then in Python we look at this as dictionary format, where you have the key and value pairs separated by commas in the curly brackets. So this is an example of a dictionary or JSON, right? So this is the format. We have the key, which is message, and the value is the user created successfully. So we all know how dictionary works. That's how data is sent in and out. Basically, at the basic level, we understand the formalities later, but right now we know that once we know about dictionary, we know that Python, this particular data is going to be working on dictionary. So whatever the front end should be bringing should be a dictionary. Whatever we'll be sending from the back end back to the front end should also be in format of a dictionary. Okay, so whatever we are going to receive here, so we are going to receive users data, the user from the front end data, right? So we need to define a particular parameter called user, for example. Now when you do user like this is one parameter, all right, but every particular parameter that you have in these functions should come with the data type they should be. You need to tell Python the data type of the particular argument that you give it. So we know the data types already in Python, right? We have string, we have dictionary, we have list. It can be a list, it can be a dictionary, it can be a string, it can be a number, it can be an integer, it can be a float. So we need to define the data type of the argument at this point. You don't just give the argument like that. So how do we specify the data type? So after the name of the argument, you do colon in front of it, then you specify the data type. Because this is a user data type that we receive from the front end, we say that anything from the front end coming should be in format of not anything but most of the things, because sometimes we'll be accessing the data, a user using the only the ID. But right now most of the things should be in format of a dictionary. So this user data is going to contain first name, last name, and things. All those things should be in a dictionary. So the data type that for this particular user argument should be a dictionary. So you write dict. So this dict just simply means that the user data that will be receiving at this endpoint should be is a user, right? The argument is user, but the data type of that should be a dictionary. So we are receiving a dictionary. Let's see how this will affect the front end, especially the post terminal. First, let's quickly open our terminal and then have this thing. Let me push this in up for us to see very well. So I'm pushing this thing up to activate the virtual environment. It's activated. I'm seeding into the app as usual, and now I'm going to run my Uvicorn to see the front end. It's complete. So we go to our front end. Oh, sorry about this. Then we reload. Yeah, so we reload. We have our basic stuff, right, that we had from the previous session. So now let me expand. We are focusing on post, right? Create user post. So I'm collapsing it Then you can see something new here. Over here before the tryout, right? There is something new. So we just go to tryout. So you see the tryout, there's a body before the execute. Initially, the execute function or button just come only the only one that come here. But before that, here they have given you a field where you can fill in the data, the actual data to test in the database. So because this particular endpoint is expecting something to pass to the function below it. So this one is now because we now have an argument, and that argument is a dictionary type. So you can see that it's a dictionary type. So if you go to the front end or the user interface, you can see that this is a dictionary in a curly bracket, and they have put additional prop one. So just like a message, like you put a key here and then you put a value here, right? Basically, that's what we do. Since we are going to do well, this is what we will do. I'm going to change it to the key should be, let's say, name. Let me put it in here, Kwame, as the key. So the name is a Kwame. So we are going to run to execute this and see what will happen. So I'm running this. So message user created successfully. So the same message that we had last time is coming because nothing is happening. We just received the user data and we are just returning this as usual. But then nothing will happen in our database because we haven't linked to it. We just define an argument. Okay, so first, every particular endpoints that we'll be creating or this argument, right? This function should be running with the database. It's going to depend on the database. This function or most of the endpoints will be depending on the database. So we need to actually pass an argument that will allow us to take the database. But before that, we need to create a session, or we need to create a simple function that will give us a session of the database each time. I told you about a session before, right? When I say a session, is just like booking a meeting between two individuals. So booking a meeting between the app and then the backend, that's a session. That's a session. That particular instance where they both communicate is a session. So if you have something like that, so what we are going to do, we need to create a session and call every time. So for that one, there's a popular function that we actually write in order to get the database at every point in time. It's a function. So I'm going to write that at the top here. Let me put an argument here. Is function to retrieve database session. Okay, so let me put this thing down so that we can see very well. So what I will do is that it's a def function. We are going to call it get database. It's not an endpoint database, the endpoint function. It's just a simple function at the top here. So now inside it, we are going to call the data db equals to session local. You know where this session local is coming from? This session local, let me expand it to make it clear for you. This session local, remember we did it in database when we are creating database. We go down here, this session local, this is the one that we need. This is the one that we're creating the session, right? This is the one that we need. So we go there to the main and we need to call it. But then how do you call it? We need to import it. Why are we going to import it from? We are going to import it from database. So we say from database import session local. Yeah, so now the error is gone. Okay, now after that, let me close this side. Now after that, we are going to try. You should know about try and finally and except so far by now. So try, we are going to do db. No, we are going to yield db, and then we'll do a finally. When the session is done, then we just db dot close. We just close the database when we are done providing a session. So we don't leave it open. Anytime you just do the session we are done, we close the because the database we always need to be closing our database. You just get an instance, then you close it. Get an instance and you close it. This is what happens. So this is the simple function that we're using to call the database an instance or a session of the database in each point. So you need it. So now this is the function that will be passing to every endpoint that we need to work with the database, right? So we say that this particular function is going to depend on the database, right? It's going to depend on the database. So what we are going to do is that there's something that will tell FastAPI that this is going to be a function that will depend. Everything should pause. So you need to go to from FastAPI, import FastAPI itself, comma. Then there's another one called depends. You need to import this depend as well. It's something that will help you to make sure that before the entire function will run, you are going to tell FastAPI that okay, before you run this particular function, please the function will depend on whatever we are going to pass to depends that we are importing. Let me put that into context or an example. After this argument, the next one will be database equals to, it should be a session, sorry, it's a colon to define that it is a session data, it's a session type, and this session type is going to depend on get db. Basically, this is what happened, but we don't have session here. Session is not imported, so we need to go and import session. Where do we generally import session from? From sql alchemy.orm. We are going to import session. Why are we importing it? We just need it to start to just define database as a session. So this is a data type for the database, but this session is going to depend on the function that we have here. So what is going to happen is that when we call this endpoint, this function will run, right? But before this function will run, FastAPI will read it and say like, okay, before you run this function, this particular function that you have will depend on this getDB. So basically, FastAPI will go and do this thing first. It will go and run this function first before coming back, and whatever it gets from here, it will pass it to the database before the entire function here will run. So that's what depends does. Depends just pause. Depends will pause the work of the particular function you have currently, go back and run a particular function before coming back. It's just like before you run this function, you need to wait, depend on this one. When you are done, before you proceed. Basically, that's what the depend does, and this is how to specify it. Now we are going to change stuff in the function. Before the return, a lot of things should happen before the return, right? So one thing we'll be doing is that the database, right? When you get the user, you need to add the user to the database. So that's the user that we'll be getting. So this user that we get from the this thing, right? In the argument, we are going to add it to the database. So let's see, this is adding. So this is telling SQL Alchemy to add this to database. That's what we are doing. After you do that, right, after you make a change, just like you are writing in Word document. Even when you are writing in Word document, when you are done typing something, right, when you are done typing something, what you do is that you need to save it. You need to save it, Control S or whatever. So the same thing on the database. After SQL Alchemy add this user to the database, we need the database needs to update it and say save, like Control save or something for the database. But how do we do that? We say db.commit. This is the one that will save make the changes. So since there's a new change, the commit will come and do the saving for us. So this saves new changes in the database. Now after we make the changes, right, remember when you create a user, when you take a user, the database will give it an ID. There will be new things that will be added to the data to the particular user that we have in the database, right? So what will happen is that those new data that is added, because they have come, they'll be given a particular ID, they'll be given a particular listing, a key, or different more things will be added to them, right? So the way they came, right, when they come to the database, they will have a specific ID in the database. So now they will now have an additional key or element because they are now taking a position in the database. So we need the new data. We need to get the fresh data from the database now. We need the fresh data from the database now because they are an ID will be added to, or something will be added to them. So what we'll do is that we are going to do database dot refresh. So what we are going to refresh, we are going to refresh user. Basically what we are doing is that after making the saves and then things are added to the user. So the user variable that we are bringing, we are going to refresh it and update it with the new added element. Basically this updates the user object, so the user object that we are bringing basically. So when we are done, what do we do? We are going to return user now. We are going to return user now. So this is what basically happened. We take the user data, we add it to the database, then the database will do the saving, and then we'll refresh our user because after saving it, it will have an ID, right? It will refresh it so that our this first one that we send to the database will not be the same as this one. This one will have more elements or added to it, right? This will have the full more components of it in the database. So that's what the refresh does for the user. So this variable here will contain more things than the previous one that we are bringing to the database. Basically. Okay. Now, this is a simple thing. This is a simple thing. We are going to the front end to run the thing again. So I'm going to refresh here. Okay, then we try it out. Then we have, okay, I'm cleaning this. I'm going to enter name. It was Kwame that we added, right? Yeah. So I'm going to execute again. Now we are facing an internal server error. So meaning there's an issue in our server or in our database. There's a problem there. So we go back to our code. We go up here. Then you see that there's an error here. The SQL alchemy.orm is a class built-in, but this is not mapped. So what is this trying to mean is that database, the SQL alchemy doesn't work with dictionary. The SQL alchemy that goes and adds it to the database does not specifically work with dictionary explicitly, right? Yes, it's a dictionary, but then everything that we have will be a dictionary, all right. But the dictionary should have a format of a model. Remember, SQL Alchemy creates tables in database using models, and we have created those models before. Example, when we went to db underscore model, so it works with model. So we have a one model here, which is the user model, right? So SQL Alchemy is expecting that even though it's a dictionary, that particular dictionary should be following a model, meaning this particular model that we have, right? So and we don't have that, particular model currently running. We're just going to save, and SQL Alchemy will reject that as an error. So how do we pass a model to this? So let's go back to our main plan. We now know that, okay, this database adding and things, this particular thing, right, is not following any model currently. So we need to create a model from what the user will give us. So basically the model that we'll be using is that we have right now for users. The user model that we have is this particular table, right? Is this particular table model that we have. So we need to use it. If no, SQL Alchemy will not proceed. So anytime you have something from the front end, you need to convert it to a model form, so that the model form will be the one that will be SQL Alchemy can understand and use for the backend. Okay, so how do we get that model done now? So first we need to import our model. Where's our model? We need to import our model from db underscore models, right? So from db underscore models, we are going to import from that models, we are going to import user. Yeah, this is a user. So it's capital U. Remember, capital U. Then the model starts with capital letters. Models start capital letters. So we are importing this particular model. Let's go back to our main design. Let me close this. So we now have our model now. So what we'll do is that we now create a new variable inside the function. First, we need to convert new user will be equal to the user model that we have, right, in brackets. So what are the things that the model contains? What are the things that the model contains? The model contains so we have table name. There is a table name, we don't need it. The ID there is a primary key, so database will automatically assign an ID key, so we don't need to pass this. This is not necessary. Database will do it itself. But we need to, from the front end, we need to pass an email, we need to pass first name, and we need to pass last name, right? So we just basically assign first name, last name, and email. So we need to pass that to the model. So into bracket email, the email that will be received by this model will be equal to user.email. You know how to access items from a dictionary, right? This is how we do user.email. So this user, small u user, is the one that we are passing to the argument here. Remember, this is a dictionary, so we are converting this dictionary to the model. So this is the model, capital USER, receiving its various field, and this various field email is from the model that we created, and the models are email, the contents are email, first name and last name. That's why when I come here I need an email, and by that email data should be equal to user.email. This is coming from the one that we are having from the front end. Let me proceed. First name, right? First name will be equal to user dot, let me close this, user dot first name, then last name as well equals to user dot last name. So these ones, this last name and things, they should be coming from this user dot email. This email should be coming from this user. This first name here should be coming from this user, and then this user dot last name should be coming from this user, right? It should be coming from here. So let's go back to our so when you come to the database, you cannot use the model again. Right now we have a new model, the one that SQL can understand. So we say new underscore user, that's what we pass. And even this one too, anything concerning the database should be a model form. So we say new underscore user, because this is the variable that contains the model format one, not the direct one from the front end. So we have made changes, right? Now we go to our front end and refresh and see what will happen again. So we try it out, and I'm going to first name. They say it should contain first name, right? So I'm going to do Kwame. So I'm running this, I'm going to execute. Let's see what will happen. Still there's an internal server error. Okay, so we go there. I'm trying to show that. So they say the dictionary object has no attribute email. So basically there's no email from here, from the front end thing that we are having, right? There's no email. Remember, the only thing I entered there was the one with the key was first name. I only entered a value of first name for me, but then I did not specify for items like email. I didn't specify for items like first name. I didn't specify for, I specified for first name, but I didn't specify for last name. So last name and email didn't do. So what I will do is that I'll go and provide an email, right? I'll go and provide an email. So let me say email Kwame at gmail.com. It should be a proper email. If it's not a proper email, it will also reject it as an error because of the data type that we are using. Then yeah, I'm going to provide email only and see what will happen. Expressing property name includes in double quotes. So yes, there shouldn't be comma in the front here. So run this first. Still internal server error. Still internal server error. So let's go to the internal server error. Then we see that user.email, right? I have user.email. So why is this still pointing at this error again? Let me go to my front end. Did I even refresh? No, I don't think I refresh. Okay, I needed to refresh this and do first name. I'll do Kwame. Last, no. I needed email, right? So that email will be Kwame at gmail.com. Yes, so let me execute this. Internal server error again. Has no attribute email. but I'm entering email in the database. So what I will do is that you see the space here, it wants to follow the format, the same format, email and the email, comma here, right? First name Kwame, email Kwame at gmail.com. I run it. Still you say user dot email, but I've run email here. Wow, what's happening? First name, last name. Okay, I get what's I guess what is happening now. I guess what is happening now. Because we are using a dictionary, it shouldn't even be in that format, basically. And I know why it's doing so. Let's run this, try it out. Additional props, right? Let's write the dictionary inside this. Let's write the dictionary inside this. So I'm trying to show all the possible error. I know what we'll do straight, but then I just want to show the one that you shouldn't be doing. First name is Kwame. Email Kwame at gmail.com. Okay, let me execute this. Internal server error again. Has no attribute email, dependent values. So you see those issues, right? Where you now have to specifically be entering, defining, trying to match the things one by one, right? Those issues is going to be solved by one particular knowledge model that we need to define how objects will be received into our database. We need to define how objects should be received in our database. That's what it is. So it shouldn't be a dictionary, right? It shouldn't just be a dictionary. Even though most of the things are dictionary, people can enter multiple items at dictionary. I can enter multiple lines at dictionary, but those names inside may not even contribute or may not even be the same as the one we have already in the we are expecting in our database. So we need to define how data, the formats in which data should come to our database. We need to define the format in which we should receive format of database. We need to be the one to tell the front end how data should come, right? So that's why we are going to add a new concept called the Pydantic. We are going to add a new concept called the Pydantic. So we are going to, in the same app, right? We are going to, let me say we are in the app, right? So we are going to create a new file. So we are going to Pydantic model. I'll call it pd underscore models dot py. Yes. So what is the Pydantic model used to do? It's used to validate data. Basically, that's what it does, right? So when you have a particular data, it helps you to define how data should come in and how data should go out from the database. Basically, that's what the Pydantic do. Okay, so we are going to have it also has its model class, its base model class. So we are going to say from Pydantic import base model. Basically, not just that, we are going to be yeah. So let's work with this one. For example, remember when we were doing the DB models, there was something like a base class which we created from the database, right? We created it from the database here, like the down base here. We created it from here, which we used to create every the model inside the database model, right? And when we come to Pydantic models, it also depends on this base model for itself. It doesn't use the base that we created because this one is for data validation. So we need a base model for that. So let me close this thing, right? So first, it's also going to be a class because it's going to be a model as well. So we are going to say user in. Let's say user in. So how user data will come in, that's the name of the class. So we say base model. It's going to depend on the base model, like how we have the base in the previous session. So we close that. Then we say what are we expecting from the user? How data should come in. This is where you define it. We are expecting first name, right? And that first name should be a string, basically. And then we are also expecting a last name, and that last name should also be in a format of a string. We are defining how database should come, how data should come into our database, and then we are also expecting an email, and the email should also be a string, basically. Right, so these are the three things that we are expecting. So if it's a dictionary, yes, dictionary can contain many data, but then we are stating that whatever we are bringing to our database should follow this format. So Pydantic allows you to explicitly determine or explicitly declare how the various field in which the front end should fill, so that the data can come inside. Data will look at how data will also go out. So but let's go back to our main data, main function. Then we'll go here. We are not going to do dict. We are going to do um the base model that we created right now. We created the Pydantic model, right? User in. So we go back to our main thing. We need to import it. So we say from PD models, import user in. So we are importing the user in that we just created right now, and we are going to use it here. So it's user in. So we should make sure that it's a dictionary, all right, but then it's going to be a user in one, so that the front end will see it and be like, okay, this is the format that the back end wants. Right, so it's a PD model, Pydantic model, validating how the format. So we should be seeing first name, last name, email. We should explicitly tell the front end so let's go back to our front end and see if this thing will change from dictionary to the user in format. Okay, so let me go there. Now let me try it out. So you can see, if you go try it out, you can see first name, last name, and email. They are all here already. So that telling you that this is the format that we want. So the Pydantic model allow you to explicitly define how, when you come to here and you are front end, you want to send a data to our database, and we want to create a user. Please, we need first name, we need last name, we need an email. Don't change the field. Just change here. It's a string, so anything that you want to put over here. So I'm going to put Kwame. I'm going to put last name. Let's say Johnson. And then for the email, I'm going to put anything here. Okay, so it works. So let me execute this. Yeah, so you see that response, it has come with a response, has come with a result for us, because that result, we are expecting it from here. Look, because that's the new user that we got here right now. New user. So user data, that's what we are. So we are returning this user from here again. So what we'll do is that instead of returning this new user, we are going to return new underscore user. This one rather, because this is the one that we come with the model, right? But before that, let's see if there's any change added to our database, because this one was run successfully and returned as a positive result. So let's go to our database. I want to refresh all row again. Yeah, you see, this is it. So I have the ID, the email, first name and last name, Kwame and Johnson, is stored in my database, and the email is anything. Email is anything. There's one thing we need to do about the email. No email can be anything here like that. It should be an email format. Email have something dot gmail.com, right? So we need to go to our Pydantic model and say that, oh, we know that email takes a particular format, so it shouldn't be just a string. Email should not be a string. So we go to Pydantic model, then we go and import something called email str, email string, basically. So you come here, you clean this, and you say it should be email string. Okay, so now we go back to the front end. We go back to the front end, and then we'll refresh. When you refresh, you try it out, you see that it's now giving you the email is now user@example.com. So let's try it again and write something, anything again. Let's write anything again. Let me write somewhere here. Let me write Okoro as an example. I'm writing anything again, right? I'm executing this. what's happening. They say there's an error body, right? Is it an email address must have an at sign. The value is not a valid email. The email is not a valid email. It's telling us that error. So you have to go here and make sure that what you have here should be an email. So I'll do Samuel at gmail.com. It should be a valid email. If not, it will not accept it. Now that it has accepted it, now we execute it. When we execute it, it has returned it for us. Now you see that there's an ID added 3 over here because we have refreshed, and our database now in our main file we are now returning new user. We are not directly returning user again, but then from the model, this is what happened. We send that is a user to do the model, right? And we add it to the database. When we refresh, the refresh has added an ID. The refresh will update the user update. When it's updated, it has added an ID to it. Is that ID that we are seeing at the front because we are returning the new user instead of returning this? Is that's what we are seeing at the front end here as ID equals 3. So the other previous data is here, but there's now a new ID added to the user. That's what we do. So we'll go back to our database and see if that's going to happen here. So right click, all rows. I'll be able to see, you see that this one. So now someone at gmail.com, that's the email, that's the first name, that's the last name that has been added. So yes, so these are the basic thing that we need to do to define. So this is the full format of creating a new user, right? Right now we have defined how data will come in using the user in. Later on we'll define how data will go out. We define how data will go out of the database as well, right? And focus on password and other things. Let's see what we can do. So if you have any question, put it in the comment section so I can respond to you. I hope this thing was very helpful and clear enough, because we are doing a practical way and explaining this alongside, right? Yeah, see you in the next session.